Hello and welcome to this visit to the Kubinka Tank Museum. This is actually a really old set of photos that I've had kicking around for a long time. They're all posted on my website and it's from a visit to Kubinka that was probably 2015 or maybe a little bit before, while I was working in Moscow, and it turned out one of the guys in the Moscow office of the company I was working for was also into tanks, and he managed to get us into what was actually quite difficult to get to at the time. Even when Russia was sort of an open country, this wasn't in a sanctions-y type era as we are now. But the Kubinka Tank Museum was quite a long way outside Moscow, at least a couple of hours drive, and it's sort of a little bit of a rundown set of sheds. You know, I think it was halfway between a museum and a place where the Russian military stored and displayed all the tanks that they captured and used for testing, or some of the tanks that they made and prototypes and things like that. So it was just kind of a load of tanks in a shed, and you couldn't just rock up and pay an entry fee or get in. You kind of had to book it and fill in paperwork and stuff. So what you can see here, or what you've been watching here, is some of the stuff that's just parked outside. There's a lot more to come. You've got quite a lot of this video to go. So you've got a whole range of Russian different tanks from World War II here. Can't remember, what's that, T something, and then whatever that you can just about see, it's KV2, big white stripe on it there, and something white in the background, which is probably an 85 T-34 85 there. Yeah, you can see that a little bit more clearly in this picture coming up. Oh, the 76 is the one that's next to it, but there's just so much stuff. So what I'll do, I'll shut up for a little bit and then come back after a while with a bit more narration. So Kubinka at the time had a load of different halls or long sheds really that were kind of thematic, but this was sort of the odds and sods shed. Must have been the first one we went to. You've seen a sort of First World War tank in Russian revolutionary colours. There was a lot of light tankettes of various types here. I'm always fascinated to think, how did people manage to squeeze into those damn things? But this was just all sorts of bits and pieces. Some of it Lend-Lease, some of it is that a Locust, I think? Some of it they just captured or borrowed or managed to get hold of somewhere. Bit of Matilda. The little guy you'll see there on the left, he was our guide. You had to have a guide to go around it as well, and he'd been someone who'd actually worked there for many years as well. Been kind of a tank tester, because a lot of what used to happen at Kubinka was it was the site that the Russians brought tanks to and drove them around as a proving ground to see how that works. So again, another Lend-Lease Churchill there, and then before we'll get on to some more interesting stuff coming up, so I'll take another break.
This
Yeah, and here you get some British tanks. The Centurion. I suppose there's a chance they could have captured some of these via the Arab nations, and but that's a Conqueror, so that must have been a swap from one of the British tank museums, maybe when there was good behaviour. That's a Chieftain. Again, I suppose that could have been picked up from one of their allies in the Middle East, and then you get some of these strange little armoured cars as well with British symbols as well, and then God knows what that is, Canadian snow vehicle of some sort. Maybe that got left at the North Pole and someone hopped over the top perhaps to do that. And then there's some much more interesting contemporary stuff coming up. That you've got some that's not the Chaffee, is it? That's the slightly bigger one, whose name escapes me at the moment. If I could zoom in on that, I'm sure I could find out. But yeah, you'll see a few more different bits of much more contemporary stuff coming up here that's American. But then you see in the back there's still some Second World War stuff to come. So again, watch out for some weirdness coming up. And after these, I suspect Israeli Shermans, look at this. This is one of the coolest things. This is from the Bay of Pigs. I think it was a Pershing there. This was actually landed in Cuba and captured and then brought back to Kubinka to drive around. And they've kept the crazy paint scheme and they kept it in pretty good nick, it must be said. And then some other different bits and pieces coming up. Yeah, look at that. That definitely is an Israeli one. You've got the reactive armour bolted on it there. Our guy is pointing at it and showing it to us, and again, that must have been something from, is that an M48, I believe, that sort of paint scheme and that sort of front. Perhaps that's something out of the Korean War or Vietnam potentially as well. And after that one, into a completely new hall here, and what you're looking at here is the start of the German Second World War hall, which I suspect, knowing the demographics of people who follow my website and my YouTube channel, this may well be of most interest. Now this, I suspect, well, not suspect, it has to be surely the most complete range of German Second World War armour anywhere in the world. I think it's in a brand new shed, but you can get a good view of the shed there. Just a very old-fashioned building to store it, and it starts right from the Panzer I, goes through pretty much everything that you've seen in World of Tanks, all the way up to the big old beast at the back. So you're starting in your early war stuff that's painted grey, and then you start getting some of these little Marders and other things like that built on the 38T chassis that's coming in, all in some kind of fun camo schemes. A lot of these early and mid-war tanks, and lots of little angles, so ideal for your painting ideas over that. So I'll sit back and let you see if you can identify as many German tanks as possible over the next few minutes. So here you've got the near mythical Stug 33B, the sort of tank thingy destroyer, well, not a tank destroyer, I suspect a blockhouse kind of destroyer, big mortar. Very, very few of these ever made, and here actually is one of them that managed to survive the war intact, which is quite remarkable. Before you get onto the much more normal Panzer III, Panzer IV type stuff that's coming up, and then you do start getting into the more interesting ones. Now, is that a Nashorn? That's a very, very big old gun on there. You've got the Sturmtiger Brumbar. Again, probably many, many more in most Wargames collection than ever existed. The Panzerjäger, Panzer IV as well, sitting there. And then a few of these tanks have even got some dings in it from where they've been shot at. And you'll be able to see coming up here, you've got a very big close-up showing the wonderful quality of welding on the old Brumbar. See how nicely that was put together towards the late end of the war. Jagdpanther, that nice stripy thing, yep, that's a real bit of camo as well, that you can see, slightly darker photo there. And then we do start getting into the real literally unique stuff here. You've got Adam, I'm pretty sure there's a 1/144 scale model of this huge mortar thing, track mortar that you used to be able to get from World Panzer thing, those Japanese kits. There's the back of the Jagdtiger again, and of course, as well as the Jagdtiger, you can see opposite it the proper Tiger One as well, a nice bit of sort of brown and yellow camouflage. But of course, the star of the show for Kubinka is the reconstituted mouse. This is bits from, as our guy told us, bits from two different prototypes, and those holes you can see there, which you may well see a better close-up of soon, this was where the Russians shot at it with increasingly large caliber ammunition to see if it would have been penetrable, and the answer is pretty clearly no. It's just not penetrable at all. It's just impossible to get through. So yeah, that's actually the only mouse that exists still in well, still anyway, because there were only two prototypes built and the bits were wedged together to form that one. And then you get into more so, or back into walking up the other end of it and starting to see some different, more straightforward types of tank. But the mouse, definitely the star. And here coming up, next one, you've got some really obscure stuff. You're getting into real, did this really exist in the tech tree You can get it in World of Tanks. I think this is the VK 3001. Again, super rare, even in the real world. But somehow the Russians managed to capture some and stick them into this shed next to this big collection of all their other tanks, next to everything really. You know, here's the proper elephant. I guess a lot of these were captured at Kursk. Really straightforward camo scheme. That's probably doable, but looks a little airbrushy. Whether that would really work with a brush, who knows? But yes, all sorts of big and small stuff. And I think even on the left there, you'll see a little 222, I think it is, scout car. So yeah, sit back, see a few more German tanks. Hey, look at that. You've even got a Goliath on a little carrying wagon. What else have we got coming up here? I think this, yeah, you've got the Stummel, the support version of the Hanomag, which is pretty cool. And again, another thing that I thought was only in Flames of War, you've got the rocket launcher armoured version of the Hanomag as well. And then you get onto the big, massive SKDFZ things and like this. Then here's another bizarre rarity. This was some sort of German experimental minefield clearing vehicle. I think there's some instructions, or sorry, not instructions, explanation here. If you're any good at Russian, you can probably work that out. But no, there's just stacks and stacks of this stuff. All the different vehicles that you could possibly want to have. And you know, here we are stood in the middle of a whole shed, which I suspect is now much flashier in a different building, of loads and loads of German tanks. Look how big that thing was. That's just completely bonkers. And as we come up to sort of the tail end, not even sure what that is, tail end of this thing, then on the way out, we actually saw this. It was driving around. I believe this was a Czech-built post-war one. It's not actually a proper Second World War thing. But then you get onto the French and other different nations all in one place. I think these wheels are actually wooden, which is or possibly coated in wood or some sort of wood effect. Maybe they're knockoffs or something like that. And loads of bizarre little tanks that I'll sit back and let you have a look at how small and how tiny they actually are. And here we go, a load of Hungarian stuff. Have you ever seen a museum with Hungarian tanks in it? Well, this is the one. There you go. You know, there is no limit to this stuff. It goes on for ages. And after the Hungarians, what do you get? Well, I guess you got someone else that the Russians were fighting, but somewhere else entirely. Yes, you get into a pretty big set of Japanese tanks too. How cool is that? And just outside, just kicking around, a massive armoured train. And of course, everywhere there's always a T-34, always a T-34-85 as well, before you get back and get into some of the early Russian war stuff. And you will be able to probably start to recognise that if you've got the model. How many turrets can you fit on a tank? T-28, I think? No, or T-35 possibly. But yeah, more turrets than you can possibly wave a turret at. And here we're very much into the classic Russian Second World War tanks and tank destroyers in that furious way in which they just built a new one and stuck a bigger and bigger gun on it as often as they could. And by now you're starting to get into the hall of post-war or soon post-war and after the war Russian experimental vehicles. A lot of these were just prototypes, never went into production. I think there's one coming up you'll see with double width tracks, not quite yet, it's in a couple of photos time, which was, I believe, designed for going over, here we go, yep, going over very, very squishy, messed up ground in the aftermath of the nuclear war. So glad that one was never used and never designed. But if you're looking at late war, interwar monsters or some sort of weird World War II, I think you would struggle to get much weirder than this sort of thing. These things are all called Object something with the K's in it. But so again, yeah, weird science fiction stuff, but also then a whole load of more straightforward Russian Second World War AFVs coming up in this very, very green painted hall. And again, between the halls, there are some iconic Soviet style for the good of the fatherland, motherland. Sorry, yeah, for motherland. Look at that, a tank knocking the lid off a German tank. That's just what they're supposed to be doing, isn't it? Crushing the Nazis under the wheels, under the tracks, in the Great Patriotic War. And it's not all tanks. There's some armoured personnel carriers. You've got some MTLBs. You've got a tiny little, that may even be an air mobile, air portable thing, I suspect. And then you get into a whole little shed full of different marks of BMPs as well. So you're getting decidedly post-war at this stage. It's about this point you start to think that surely there are only 3 marks of BMP, and maybe a BDM, the slightly lighter version of it as well. But no, there's certainly a lot more to choose from in this particular haul before we get to kind of the end of this more lightweight armour and armoured car, different types of armoured car haul, which eventually is going to take us outside, and then we will see a bit more of the park or parkland that was surrounding all of these different sheds, and a few more of these great patriotic war murals as well, as they send their SUs forth to go and crush the Nazis. And with that, there's just a few more random photos that seem to have crept out of order of the German tank hall to go through. So you get a bit of a recap of some of the AFVs that are there in that German area in their different types of camo. There's another shot of the mouse coming up as well, in case you've missed it or forgotten it. And then other than that, we're into the end zone, and this is the end of the tour of the Kubinka Tank Museum, and it's what I suspect is its former home.